With the economy being locked down for the past year, a lot of people are looking to tiny houses as being a more affordable way of getting by. I built this tiny house with my father from the ground up and have lived in it for the past year. I love living in my tiny house, but there are a few things I'd change about the design. Here are the top 5 things I'd change about my tiny house design. Number 1 is that I would put this thing on a beefier trailer. My tiny house is actually built on the frame of a recycled RV. RV trailers aren't really designed to hold as much weight as a tiny house. In order to combat that, we welded additional supports onto the frame and made sure that the tires were rated to hold this kind of weight. We calculated how much the trailer should weigh, but we haven't got a chance to put it onto a scale yet. Now, this tiny house wasn't designed to make mobile trips across the country. This needs to make one 6-hour trip from its current location to the farm property that I own in Central Washington. That being said, I am a little nervous about it making the journey from here to that final location. Some people might be asking, well, why didn't you just use a more expensive trailer in the first place? The difference in costs of trailers is significant. This whole RV that I built this off of cost $400. With the additional metal that I used and welded onto this, it ran about $700. If I were to have bought a professionally made trailer from a trailer specialist, I'd be starting out at a price around $3,500. Another consideration was that I wanted to do every part of this project myself. So I didn't really want to hire out having the trailer built. I wanted to take part in crafting part of that. And my welding skills increased significantly from this project. Because for me, that was part of why I did this build, was because I got to learn how to do framing. I got to learn how to do roofing. I got to learn how to do wiring. It was a very rewarding project in that I improved my skills in so many different areas. I was handy to begin with before I started this project. Now, I can build a house from scratch. I was trying to stick to a budget, so I cut down on one of the biggest expenses. Time will tell if that was a good choice or not. One thing I definitely wish I had done differently is the location of my HVAC unit. Currently, it's located about 10 feet up on this wall. During the summer months, it does a great job of blowing cool air up there that then sinks down and really cools this place down. Because heat rises, heat tends to stay up in the loft areas, so that is nice to have that cool air up there when I'm trying to sleep during the summer months. Unfortunately, during the winter months, it's the exact opposite. The problem here is that the hot air stays up top in this tiny house and doesn't come down to this lower level as much. So when I'm downstairs in the morning after a cool evening, it's pretty chilly. To combat that, I just picked up a small space heater and I let that run in this lower area to warm it up. That's pretty much solved that problem. However, if I was going back, I would design things a little bit differently. There's another reason I'd want to move my HVAC unit. HVAC units come with a certain length of piping with them. And that piping ends up putting this right behind my head where I sleep at night. That HVAC unit is literally on the other side of this wall. The HVAC unit isn't super loud, but it's definitely noticeable, especially when it's kicking on and off during the middle of the night to maintain the temperature that I set. I would consider just moving it. However, with the wiring the way it is in this house and the way that the layout is of this house, there isn't another good spot to put it in there. So as I said, I get a constant reminder every night about my design flaw there. The next thing I would change about my tiny house is I would get rid of the composting toilet. Composting toilets just aren't for me. They can be environmentally friendly if you're actually composting your waste. But from what I've seen on the internet, most people are just basically pooping in a bucket and dumping it into their trash can, which isn't really a composting toilet. That's just being irresponsible with your waste. One thing I'd take into more consideration with composting toilets is what the weather is like in that area. Human excrement tends to be kind of moist as it is, so when you have a moist climate with moist waste, it just makes for not the right recipe for success. We had some minor horror stories with the composting toilet that I'm not going to go into detail with here. I had a feeling I might not like the composting toilet, which is why I also plumbed my bathroom for a flush toilet. We'll be putting in a septic system at the tiny house's final location. The next design consideration is probably the most important. One thing I don't think is talked about enough with tiny houses is moisture control. When you're in such a small space, The moisture put off from your body makes such a huge difference in the humidity in that environment. This wasn't a problem during the summer months, but during the winter when it's cool and damp outside, this becomes a significant issue. If it's not properly taken care of, this could lead to mold in your tiny house, and nobody wants that. There's a few ways that people combat moisture in their tiny house. One is by having a dehumidifier. Another is by having a wood-burning stove that just kind of dries out the air inside of their house itself. In this tiny house, my HVAC unit actually does have a setting to dehumidify the room. Unfortunately, during that process, it cools down the room significantly. So once you heat the house back up, you kind of have the same issue. There's a few actions I've taken to help control the moisture in my tiny house. One thing that's helped is having several plants in here to help absorb some of that moisture. I also have a bucket of charred wood above my cabinets that acts as a moisture absorber. Unfortunately, there's still a few things that can really steam up my tiny house. For example, if I'm boiling some water on my stove, if I'm taking a hot shower into the bathroom, or if I'm drying a load of laundry. Ideally, all of these things would vent to the outside to take some of that extra moisture out of the air. In the case of my bathroom, I do have a fan in there that vents to the outside. However, my range hood here is a self-circulating hood. While I would have liked to put a vent to the outside with my range hood, unfortunately there was a stud right in the middle where that vent pipe would need to go. I have that exact same issue with my dryer in the bathroom as well. Unfortunately, when I was learning about doing tiny house builds, there wasn't a lot of information out there stressing the importance of moisture control within your tiny house. So that's why I'm putting that out here. The last thing I'd change about my tiny house is that I would make it a little bit bigger. My tiny house is built on a 20-foot trailer. I think an extra 4 feet on a trailer would go a long ways in allowing me some of the design flexibility to fix the other issues I have in this house. With that extra room, I could space things out a little bit more, so if I have a stud where my vent needs to go, I could scooch it to the side a little bit more. In this design, everything was tight and had a specific spot where it needed to be, so if I needed any design flexibility, I was pretty limited. If I did have an extra 4 feet of space, I would basically extend out my living area, include a small table that we could dine at, and I would kind of move the couch so that it doesn't interfere with the swing of the door. So those are the 5 things that I would change about my tiny house. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you're doing a tiny house build of your own, let me know in the comments section below. If you like this video, you may also like my tiny house build video, or to see what I did with the metal from this RV frame. Both videos are linked in the description below.